testing a bunch of watercolor and water-soluble pencils over the past 2 years. I painted all kinds of things with them, and these 5 types I'm going to talk about are by far the best ones in my experience. I'm going to show you how I use them and how they compare with one reference I'll be painting 5 times. So now grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. And hi, my name is Françoise. Welcome back to my channel, where you'll find a ton of water-soluble and watercolor pencil videos. So what is so special about these water-soluble and watercolor pencils? Well, if you've tried them, you know that a lot of them leave nasty little lines underneath blended artwork. And they can also feel very disappointing to a lot of people, and there are 2 reasons for that. So the first one is that most people don't know how to use them and what's even possible with them, which I'm going to give you a glimpse of in this video. And the second reason is that a lot of water-soluble and watercolor pencils are not that great, even with established brands, honestly. My top 5 include 3 water-soluble kinds and 2 watercolor pencil kinds, and even though they are not a 10 out of 10, they have those qualities in common. They are not dry. Instead, they're very creamy and it's easy to draw and color. They leave little to no lines at all. Instead, they blend very well. There is no need to layer a zillion times because they're vibrant. And although they can sometimes break, some more than others, and I'll make sure to point that out, the quality is overall pretty good. The first kind that I want to talk to you about now are the FaberCastell Graphite Aqua. The cons with these is that they can be a bit messy at first, just like regular graphite, but they erase pretty well. It can also be tough to preserve white areas because they're dark. The FaberCastell ones come in a set of 5. Only HB and 2B are light, and all the other ones get darker and darker because they are softer and softer. And that's when it's useful to learn all the watercolor pencil techniques I teach, especially the one that I use to blend colors without making a mess. And I have plenty of videos on that topic already here, so I won't elaborate on that now. These pencils' pros are the fact that there are just 5 shades to choose from, like I said, which will help those of you who need to practice on building up good contrast in a painting. So it looks a bit more realistic and less flat. Having just those 5 shades helps focus on observing a reference, spotting the light, mid, and dark values, and learning to place them in your art without having to worry about color picking. In fact, here I only used 3 of them: the HB for sketching, the 4B to place midtones, and the 8B for the dark tones. Remember that water can help us lighten up any color. We can also keep paper white areas in the art. And I use these tricks all the time to build great contrast with as little as 2 colors. And that goes for watercolor pencils, water-soluble pencils, but also watercolor. I also love that these pencils allow an artist to paint professional graphite art in way less time, thanks to the great blendability of these pencils with water. There's a little bit of shine, but not near as bad as regular graphite. And I also want to point out that I use these a lot in combination to other things like regular watercolor pencils or even watercolor to place dark tones. Notice also that now that the art is finished, the very dark 8B pencil areas do lift slightly still when I rub a finger on them, but the 4B hardly does. And that's great because the water helps the pigment set and avoid more mess once everything is finished. You really have to press to get some of that pigment off, unlike a regular pencil drawing. These pencils stand out for how elegant the outcome can be and how simple the process always is because of the fewer color choice. They're, I think, a great compromise between graphite and watercolor effects, which you can see clearly from the soft background and more realistic tree. The second type that I want to talk about are the Derwent Intense pencils. And I have the newer 100 pencil set box as well as the older 72 pencil box. And Even though I could make do with only 3 colors, I decided to pick 5 of them. Intense pencils' cons is that they can create hard to remove stains if a pigment chunk lands on wet paper, which is why I like to pre-wet my palette and then allow them to melt directly on there and avoid any particles from flying around and landing on the wet paper. As you'll notice, I do this with every other kind of pencils. A lot of people, including the brand, claim that they cannot be lifted once dry, which many times and with most papers I found isn't necessarily true. So far as I am concerned, that's not a cons at all. Just like watercolor, it's still going to be hard to completely lift them off once they're on paper and that it's dry. There will still be a little bit of color left. And on some papers, they can be removed once dry, while on other papers, I found that it is harder. But that's just my experience. Another cons that I can think of is that they can look a bit streaky on some papers, but overall they blend nicely and it looks pretty good. The wood barrel and lead are also not top quality, I'd say. They can be a bit easier to break, but it's more than decent compared to many other brands that won't make my top 5. Inktense, for some reason, are also controversial because they're ink-based probably. So some people seem to love them, while others find so many flaws about them, and I always get a lot of comments about those. Another thing in the controversial department is that lots of people say that they're not light fast. They might fade easily after some years. But my take on that is that even with the best supplies out there, not all colors in one set will be light fast. And even if all of them were, ratings vary a lot from one color to the next anyways. So please everyone, let's just enjoy those Inktense pencils for what they are and the beautiful results that they yield and have fun. And if what you're looking for here is a brand that you can use to actually sell your art, keep watching. Inktense pencil pros are the intensity first of all, as the name indicates, beautiful colors that make coloring and painting with them very pleasing. I also love how opaque light colors are on top of dark ones. And in that category, they outperform everything else. Same with the white pencil. It goes on top of everything else very nicely. And I did tape the tutorial for this tree here with Inktense. It's on my Patreon in real time and with my voiceover. So if you want to join and access many other watercolor pencil and water-soluble tutorials for a small monthly fee, you'll find a link in the description of the video. I love my Derwent Graphite pencils. I've shared a few videos using these, as well as a video when I was using the pans, which I also love very much. A cons with these pencils is that there's less color choice, and as you can see, they can all be pretty similar. For example, no red here, it's mostly orange and brownish colors. Like the Inktense, they seem a bit less qualitative when it comes to the lead and the wood barrel, but again, not bad at all. And to some, the fact that they're muted colors could be a cons. To me, this is actually part of the pros because it makes them so unique. And as you can see here, the art is colorful, just a tad softer. There's also a very subtle shine from the graphite particles in them, depending on how you tilt the paper and if the sun's shining on it. Although it's going to be more noticeable in the paints than it is with the pencils, I found. I had no problem getting those soft colors to look more intense with a bit of layering. And just so you know, I didn't do any more layering than I did with any other kind. The trunk looks soft in color, but now watch this. When the lead is wet and you use it to draw directly on paper, it brings out the colors so much more right away. It's gorgeous and one of my favorite versions of the tree. The white pencil also performs well on top of other colors. I just found that it works better when it's just damp and not too wet. Watercolor fans will enjoy the next 2 types on my list, with first the Kah Dash Museum Aquarelle. The biggest cons is that these pencils, or the brand itself I should say, are always on the pricey side. That's why I have such a tiny set, and sadly there's no white pencil in these ones usually because you have to go for a 24 set most of the time to get a white pencil. So I had to pick lemon yellow as a way to highlight my work. Pros are that the pencils are a great quality. They have all the good features of top art supplies. They blend very well. They also spread very well, like regular watercolors, as you can see, which here actually didn't serve my painting well for what I wanted to do, since I needed to keep some whites and the sheet was too small to manage all those colors spreading around like that. Now, on the personal note, even though these pencils are nice and I know they're great quality, I was least happy with the street painting because I didn't like the colors from my set. And they were way too flashy for my taste, and I just didn't have as much fun overall. And maybe that's why I had a harder time preserving the paper white parts in the trunk. And I didn't have a white pencil either, so I'm really not that happy with it. They just gave me a hard time. In the watercolor pencil category, the FaberCastell Arbors Dur are the ones that I use the most and I enjoy the most. I also am lucky to own a large enough set, and you can easily see that some colors are my favorites. Cons, honestly, I have a hard time to find any. Maybe you guys can let me know in the comments if you have any, or just let me know what pencils you prefer out of all of these. So maybe a cons would be that such a large set can be confusing to beginners especially, and most pencils might not be used. But that's nothing to do with the brand, so let's switch over to pros. These pencils spread very well, a bit better than water-soluble kinds that do feel a tad heavier, just a tad. Most of you might not even notice that unless you start to use them a lot like I do. But now they don't spread as much as Kah Dash, so that's a good compromise. Notice how the light green color does show pretty well on top of others. So it's not opaque like Intense, but again, it's a great compromise. Even the brown color looks fantastic when it's wet, kind of like what we saw happening with the brown Graphite tint. The white pencil is pretty good here as well. It's really a must-have for me. It helps with tiny details and finishing touches. So now if I were to make watercolor pencil art to sell, the FaberCastell Arbors Dur Kah Dash Museum Aquarelle, FaberCastell Graphite Aquarelle are by far the best ones in my experience. Although I cannot tell you for sure for how long these will last if they were to sit in direct sunlight for a long time, as I've been painting with them for only 2 or 3 years and I haven't tried to do it. So this is just my impression that I'm giving you here. And now just a note on how important contrast is. Clearly the Kah Dash version with the least highlights on the tree isn't the best one here. I'm happy with all the other ones though, so I hope you found this interesting. And I will see you on Patreon or in another one of my many water-soluble and watercolor pencil videos. So thank you for watching and see you next time.